It started like any other day at Millwood High. Students buzzed through the halls, laughter echoing off the lockers, sneakers squeaking on polished floors. In the middle of it all walked Mia, a shy, soft-spoken girl who always kept her gaze low and her words fewer. Her stutter often kept her silent. It wasn't that she had nothing to say, she just knew what would happen if she tried. She'd become a target. Again, today was no different. As she quietly slipped into her homeroom seat, her presence caught the attention of a group of seniors near the door. Jake, the ringleader, cocky, arrogant, and always craving attention, grinned when he spotted her. Well, if it isn't Mia the mouse. Jake snorted, dramatically mimicking a stutter. His crew erupted in laughter. Maya's cheeks flushed. She sank deeper into her seat, trying to disappear, but the mockery didn't stop there. "Oh no," said Lexi, his partner in crime. "Date, don't hurt us with your woo words." More laughter. The teacher hadn't arrived yet. No one stepped in. Everyone laughed, but no one really saw. They didn't see the hours Mia spent training after school. They didn't know about the trophies lined up on her bedroom shelf, earned through sweat, bruises, and pure discipline. They didn't know that behind her quiet demeanor was a black belt in Taekwondo, years of sparring, and a heart full of fire waiting to ignite. They didn't know who they were messing with. After school, the halls were quieter. Mia walked alone toward the exit, but the same group cut her off near the courtyard. Jake was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, looking smug. "Hey, mouse. You gonna run home and cry again?" He sneered. Mia stopped. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her fists clenched at her sides. "I am not scared of you," she said, her voice low, her stutter showing but steady. Jake laughed. "You should be." He took a step closer. So did Lexi. A few more students gathered around, sensing the tension like sharks smelling blood. And then it happened. Jake lunged forward, trying to snatch her bag. What came next was a blur. Mia didn't flinch. Her training took over. In one swift motion, she spun, grabbed his arm, and flipped him flat on his back with a loud tasha-dud that echoed through the courtyard. Gas rippled through the crowd. Lexi froze. Jake groaned on the ground, trying to sit up, but Mia wasn't done. When Lexi rushed toward her, Mia sidestepped, pivoted, and landed a perfect roundhouse kick, stopping just inches from Lexi's nose. Lexi stumbled backward in shock, tripping over her own feet. No one laughed now. Silence blanketed the scene. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Jake sat up, rubbing his back, eyes wide with disbelief. He looked up at the girl he had mocked, the one he thought was weak, and saw something else entirely. Strength, control, power. "You, what the hell was that?" he stammered. Mia looked down at him. Her voice, though still soft, rang clear. "It's called TT Taekwondo," she said, "and I've been doing it longer than you've been a bully." The crowd began to murmur. Phones were already out. This moment was going viral. One of the teachers arrived, drawn by the commotion, but by then the fight was over. Not that Mia ever threw a punch. She didn't have to. That was the beauty of her skill. It was about defense, not aggression. Power, not cruelty. Later that day, as she walked home, the breeze felt different, lighter. For the first time in a long time, Mia held her head up. She didn't feel like hiding anymore. The next morning at school, whispers followed her again. But not the cruel ones from before. Now they spoke of the girl who took down the biggest bullies in school with grace, discipline, and precision. And when Jake passed her in the hallway, he didn't speak. He didn't dare. Some stories aren't loud. Some heroes don't roar. Sometimes the strongest voice belongs to the quietest girl, especially when she's a Taekwondo champion. Some stories aren't loud. Some heroes don't roar. Sometimes the strongest voice belongs to the quietest girl, especially when she's a Taekwondo champion. That one line defined Mia in ways no one at Millwood High had ever understood until that moment. For years, Maya had lived under the shadow of her own silence. Not because she didn't have thoughts, not because she lacked courage, but because every time she opened her mouth, her stutter gave others a reason to laugh. It wasn't fair. The world rarely is, especially for kids who don't fit the mold. While others used words like weapons, Mia was learning to master discipline, to control her breathing, to focus her energy, not into speaking, but into movement, into precision, into power. Her journey into Taekwondo began when she was just 9. Her parents had watched her struggle with speech, watched her confidence shrink each time someone finished her sentence or mocked the way she couldn't say her name without a pause. They wanted her to find something, anything, that didn't depend on speaking, that would make her feel strong. At first, she resisted. Martial arts sounded too bold, too loud, too unlike her. But that changed the first time she stepped onto the mat. In Taekwondo, she found something pure, a language of motion. There were no jeers, no mocking voices, only the sound of breathing, of discipline, of focus. Her coach didn't care how she talked, only how she trained. Her body learned to express what her voice struggled to. Every kick was a word, every form was a sentence, every sparring match was a story told without speaking. In time, she learned to stand tall, and then to strike, and then to win. Back at school, though, nothing changed. At least, not at first. She still got laughed at when called on in class. Still heard kids whisper behind her back. Still found cruel notes shoved in her locker. Her silence wasn't respected. It was seen as weakness. Her stutter wasn't a challenge, it was a joke. Even teachers, well, meaning as they were, often rushed to finish her sentences for her, unknowingly stealing the one thing she'd been trying to earn her voice. But she endured. Because deep down, Maya knew that her silence wasn't empty. It was building. Strength doesn't always show itself in volume. Sometimes it grows in quiet spaces, like the silence before a storm. That storm arrived the day Jake mocked her in front of the whole class. It wasn't the first time, but it would be the last. Jake had always seen himself as untouchable. Loud, athletic, admired by those who valued popularity over principle. When he mocked Maya's stutter, it wasn't even creative, just cruel. But this time, something in Mia changed. Maybe it was because she was tired of being everyone's punchline. Maybe it was because Taekwondo had taught her to act when the moment called for it. Or maybe it was simply because she finally believed that she didn't need to be loud to be heard. So when Jake and his group confronted her near the courtyard, they expected her to do what she always did: shrink, stutter, walk away. But Mia didn't. She stood still, her body calm, her eyes sharp. They didn't see the shift, but they felt it. When Jake reached for her bag, he made a mistake. A big one. In an instant, the girl they thought was weak became something else entirely. Fluid, precise, a storm unleashed. Her Taekwondo training wasn't about aggression. It was about control. She didn't need to fight to prove herself. She needed to defend her space, her dignity, her silence. And that's exactly what she did. The way she moved stunned everyone. Not just the bullies, but the bystanders too. Because everyone had a version of Maya in their heads. A weak, quiet, shy girl. But that image shattered in seconds. The crowd didn't see a victim. They saw strength. Not loud, not flashy, but undeniable. When it was over, she didn't gloat. She didn't yell. She didn't even raise her voice. She simply looked Jake in the eye and, through her stutter, spoke a sentence that landed harder than any kick ever could. I've been doing this longer than you've been a bully. That was the moment everything changed. Not just for Mia, but for every kid who had ever been laughed at for being different. For every student who stayed silent because they were scared of how their words would come out. For every person who ever thought strength only came with volume. Maya's story wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about violence. It was about reclaiming space. About showing the world that silence can be powerful. That a girl who stutters can still speak volumes without saying much at all. By the next day, the entire school knew. Not because Maya told them, but because someone recorded the moment, and that clip spread faster than any rumor. But for once, Mia wasn't the joke. She was the headline, and as she walked down the halls, still quiet, still composed, no one mocked her. Not because they were scared of her strength, but because they finally saw it. Some stories aren't loud. Some heroes don't roar. Sometimes the strongest voice belongs to the quietest girl, especially when she's a Taekwondo champion. Her journey into Taekwondo began when she was just 9. Her parents had watched her struggle with speech, watched her confidence shrink each time someone finished her sentence, or mocked the way she couldn't say her name without a pause. They wanted her to find something, anything, that didn't depend on speaking, that would make her feel strong. At first, she resisted. Martial arts sounded too bold, too loud, too unlike her. But that changed the first time she stepped onto the mat. The dojang was nothing like school. There were no bullies, no judgment, no pressure to speak. Just the sound of feet sliding across mats, instructors calling out commands, and the rhythmic haya of punches and kicks breaking through the air. On her first day, Mia was shy, unsure. She stood at the back of the class, barely able to make eye contact. But she listened, she learned, and slowly she began to move. Her instructor, Master Lee, never once asked her to speak in front of others. He communicated through demonstration, through patience, and most importantly, through belief. He saw something in Mia that others overlooked. Not just potential, but purpose. At home, her parents noticed the changes immediately. She stood taller. Her eyes looked steadier. She started practicing her forms in the backyard. Every block, every stance, every breath. She was learning to control what the world told her was broken. The irony was, in a world where her voice was always interrupted, Taekwondo gave her something that couldn't be cut off. It was her space, her rhythm, her power. In the dojang, she didn't have to explain herself. She just had to be. Over the next few years, Mia rose through the ranks. White belt to yellow, yellow to green, green to blue. Each promotion wasn't just a new belt. It was a new layer of strength. She competed in tournaments, not because she wanted attention, but because she wanted to test herself. She faced competitors taller, faster, louder, but she never backed down. Her stutter was still there, yes, but on the mat, she didn't need words. Her movements spoke loud enough. She won her first championship at age 12, a regional youth title. The trophy sat on her dresser, beside her alarm clock and her books. But it wasn't about the trophy. It was about what it meant. That quiet didn't equal weak. That a girl who had been told to sit down and stay silent could stand up and fight back. It was the proof she needed to remind herself who she was becoming. Yet, none of this was known at school. At Millwood High, she was still that girl who stutters. People still spoke over her, still imitated her behind her back. Teachers still called on her awkwardly, then moved on before she could finish answering. It was exhausting. Sometimes, even with all her strength, she wanted to give up. But every time that feeling came, she thought about the dojang, about Master Lee's voice telling her to breathe, to focus, to stand her ground. And she did. That's why when Jake and Lexi mocked her in class, again, she didn't cry. She didn't lash out. She just breathed. Focused. She didn't plan to confront them later. She didn't want violence. But when they cornered her near the courtyard, surrounded her with laughter and jabs, tried to yank her backpack away, her instincts took over. Years of muscle memory activated. Her hand caught Jake's wrist mid-swipe. She turned, twisted, dropped her weight, and slammed him to the ground before anyone could blink. It wasn't rage, it was reaction. Training. Calm power. Lexi's attempt to intervene was met with a pivot, a step, and a high kick that stopped inches from her face. It wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about drawing a line. That moment didn't just shift the energy around Maya. It shattered the image everyone had of her. Kids who'd never said a word to her before now whispered her name. Teachers checked in on her. Her classmates gave her space and respect. Not because she fought, but because she revealed something they never expected. And for the first time, Mia saw something new in their eyes. Not pity, not amusement, but recognition. She didn't want fame. She didn't want to be feared. What she wanted, what she had earned, was dignity, a space to exist as she was. A girl who stuttered, yes, but also a champion. A disciplined, focused, brave fighter, not in spite of her silence, but because of it. In the days that followed, students started to treat her differently. Not just with respect, but with curiosity. Some came up to her to ask about martial arts. Some asked if she'd teach them. Others, quieter than her, found the courage to speak up in her presence. One even whispered, "Thank you," as they passed her in the hall. Mia didn't say much back. She just smiled. The truth is, Mia never wanted revenge. She didn't want to prove anything to Jake or Lexi. She wanted to prove something to herself. That she didn't have to hide. That her voice, however it sounded, deserved to be heard. But more than that, she wanted others to understand something deeper. That the world doesn't need everyone to shout to be strong. That power lives in stillness. That resilience is built in quiet places. That being underestimated can be your greatest strength, if you know how to rise. And so, Maya walked the same halls in the same school with the same stutter. But everything had changed, not because they saw her differently, but because now, finally, she did.